Hello everyone, you're tuned into today's PIR live event and I'm your host Scott Jones. Before we get started, I'd like to welcome our live stream viewers. Remember that you can tweet your questions using hashtag AskPIR anytime during the live event and I will relay them to our guests during the question and answer period. If there's room in your tweet, please include your name, school, or city so we can give you a shout out. I look forward to getting to some of those questions, but first I'd like to introduce our guest today, Dr. Eleni Stroulia. She is a professor and NSERC AITF Industrial Research Chair on Service Systems Management. That comes with support from IBM with the Department of Computing Sciences at the University of Alberta. She's also an adjunct faculty member with the Faculty of Rehabilitation Therapy. That's also at the U of A. So I look forward to getting to some of those questions, as I said, but first I'll turn it over to Dr. Stroulia so she can tell us a bit more about her work. Go ahead, Dr. Stroulia.
Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I am very looking forward to your questions. I'll start with a little bit of background. My area of research is software engineering, which basically focuses on developing tools to help build software better. Now, these tools are specific to the type of software that you're building, and in the recent years, I have been involved with a very fascinating to me technology, namely virtual worlds. I'm sure most of you know what virtual worlds are. You have been probably playing games in massive online platforms, things like Minecraft, for example, is a virtual world. So essentially what we're talking about is 3D or 2D or 2.5D environments that have their own rules of physics, and many people participate and engage in communication, collaboration, and fun activities of all sorts. Now, I hear some sound. Scott?
What's that?
Can you hear this? Sorry, I apologize, that was my background. So the reason why I'm interested in virtual worlds is because I'm interested in serious games. And serious games are essentially activities that are fun and engaging, but also have a serious purpose, typically education. So the types of software that I'm building in the past 3-4 years are game-like software applications that are designed to teach people how to do different types of activities. Let me give you an example. One of the more interesting applications has been to teach medical education students how to behave in the handoff when emergency medical trainees come and bring an accident victim that just had a car accident, let's say. When these EMTs, the people who are in the ambulance, bring somebody to the emergency room, there is a very strict procedure that needs to be followed. There is information that needs to be exchanged in order to provide the most relevant data to the people who will be treating the accident victim. So to train the EMTs and to train the emergency room personnel, most typically what people are doing now is they place them in scenarios where they have to enact their professional roles. But this is very expensive because basically you have to have everybody there involved. You have to have a mannequin to stand in for the role of the accident victim. And all of this can be simplified if you have rebuilt the whole scenario in a virtual world. And then you can have the medical students and the EMT students go into that world and play out the scenario. And then you can have AIs to stand in for passerbys. You can have an AI that has specific properties to be the accident victim. And you can communicate the vital signs of the accident victim in the virtual world. So this is one of the activities that we have been involved with. And you can imagine all sorts of other training scenarios. So for example, just to give you an idea, the particular software that we're using for this virtual world is called OpenSim, and it is similar to Second Life, if you have heard about it, but OpenSim is open source, so we can go in and extend it in any way we want and build programs that run in OpenSim in ways that we can control them. In the similar line, we have been working on games to train people to perform procedures like CPR, and games that demonstrate how to perform different rehabilitation exercises and more fun activities like Tai Chi, which is a very good exercise for children that do not have complete mobility and flexibility yet, as well as senior adults. Finally, in the same overall family of programs, I would like to mention the SmartCondo project. And the SmartCondo project uses virtual worlds for another purpose, not training, but rather it uses the virtual world as a mirror of a real environment. So the way it works is that we embed sensors in a real apartment, and as people move and perform their activities of daily life in the apartment, the sensors pick up information. For example, motion sensors know where the people are. Pressure sensors know when people sit or stand up from furniture. Electricity sensors know when people use appliances. And all this data, we analyze it, and then we replay the activities of the people in the real world in a virtual world. And this kind of mirror, an obtrusive mirror of the real world, can be useful to nurses or healthcare professionals observing and supporting people who live by themselves without actually being there all the time. So in some sense, this virtual world provides a window into the house of somebody who is independent but may need a little bit of support. So all of these activities rely on the similar type of software, and I hope I have communicated a little bit about the types of applications we're building and the reason why they're useful, and a little bit about the technologies that we use, enough to cause you some interest. And I'm looking forward to your questions.
Okay, cool. So just a reminder, everyone, that you can tweet your questions to hashtag AskPIR. We'll read them out to our guests as they come in. In the meantime, Dr. Stroulia, so I enjoyed what you were saying. I'm wondering, when you're training the medical professionals, is there a hands-on component, or are they just watching like the video game in order to learn about what they need to learn?
The students are immersed in the game. So they find themselves in the virtual world, and their avatars have to go and find the accident victim. They have to place the accident victim on a board, on a spine board. They have to take the vital signs. They have to take notes, and these notes are what they communicate to the emergency room personnel. In effect, playing the game in the virtual world is the same as doing the same activities in the real world as an EMT or as a medical doctor. The only thing you cannot actually do is touch and push and prod. All of these activities are transferred or transformed into clicks on the body of the avatar that is playing the accident victim. So the whole point of this simulation-based training is to give enough of a sense of the reality, so that whatever is being learned in the virtual world can be transferred in the real world. And we have had some experiences to show that indeed this transfer happens to a good degree. More research is needed to figure out exactly how it works and when. Okay.
Very generally then, what is service systems research?
I'm not sure if up until recently, software was a product. So essentially you went to a store and you bought a DVD, and this DVD had an application that you would install on your machine and you would run it, and you would own a copy of this application. And then if another version was available, you had to go and buy it again. As a service means that you use the software through the cloud, through the internet, without owning a local copy. So I'm not sure if our audience knows about taxes, but when I was doing my taxes with QuickTax, I used to buy the QuickTax DVD at the supermarket. It started being available sometime in January. Now you would be hard-pressed to find a DVD because there is the equivalent functionality available on the cloud. This is much easier to maintain and much easier to update because you don't have to produce the actual DVDs, and in effect makes the possibility of competition much more easy because essentially I, as a client, do not have to commit to buying a product and installing it on my machine. I can keep on trying alternatives on the cloud much more easily. So it's a new way of sharing, experiencing, maintaining software that decouples the client from the provider, allows for different pricing systems. I don't buy the software once in a big fat price, but I pay per use of the software for as long as I need it, and allows for much more frequent innovation because this software can be much more frequently updated on the cloud.
Okay.
Does this make sense?
Yes, it does. So have you put any of this into practice already? And if so, how long would it take for an average medical trainee to be able to get up to speed on what they need to know?
We have conducted several experiments with medical students. So the fundamental advantage of this approach is that you can have training scenarios across universities. So in my University of Alberta, we have a medical program, but the program for the EMTs is offered by another university in Edmonton. So coordinating two classes across two universities to be present at the same time in the same general locality to enact the scenario is practically impossible. But setting up a virtual world on a server so that students from both universities, actually at their home, can meet in the virtual world at the same time is much simpler and much cheaper. So we have run a few experiments with students. We have not. The students enjoy it. They find that they can have more scenarios available to them. The degree of realism is not as good as if they were present with an ambulance in the real world, but they find it more live than textbook learning. So comparing it to the real world, it's not as good, but it is much cheaper, and comparing it with textbook learning is much more engaging, and students stick with for a longer time, and that helps remembering things better.
Right. Oh, that's really neat. So you talked a little bit too about this SmartCondo project that you've been working on. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Has that been implemented anywhere?
We have two deployments actually of the SmartCondo, and one is in the Edmonton Clinic Health Academy. This is a university building, University of Alberta building, and this is used only by students, so no real patients live there. But we're using it as a test bed to evaluate our methods and see how well we're doing. In fact, I just tweeted a link to a SmartCondo video on YouTube, where at the bottom you see my student, one of our students, Julia Vlasenko, moving around in the SmartCondo in ECA, Edmonton Clinic Health Academy, and on top you see a recording of the virtual world replaying what Julia is doing. So this shows how close the virtual world is with the real world, and you have to remember that the virtual world does not use cameras, it only uses sensor information. So this is our test deployment. Our real deployment is in the Glenrose Rehabilitation Hospital, and there they have the so-called independent living suite. And the purpose of the independent living suite is to for people who have had major surgery and have stayed at the hospital for a long time, before they go back home, they have to stay in the ILS for 2 or 3 days, and they have to sort of prove, quote unquote, that they can live by themselves. They're ready to take care of themselves. Now, without sensors, what you have is either cameras to observe the person and people do not react well to cameras. They do not like to be recorded by cameras. Or you have to have a nurse come in every so often and say, are you doing well? Do you need anything? And that would defeat the purpose. So what we have in the Glenrose is the same setup, and the unobtrusive sensors record a pretty good picture of what the person is doing and let the clinical personnel know what the person is doing without actually interrupting them all the time. So we have conducted an empirical study at the Glenrose with 2 real patients who stayed there for 2-3 days, and they did not mind the system at all. And we talked with their caregivers, and we found out that the quality of information recorded is sufficient for monitoring people without spending so much time going in and out of the ILS all the time.
Okay. That's really cool. So as work, I realize that work is continuing, but at this stage in the process, what are the main challenges that you encounter with the SmartCondo project?
I should mention that the SmartCondo project involves an interdisciplinary team of people. Software is one maybe small piece of the puzzle. The lower layer of actually how many sensors and what types of sensors we have is dealt with by my colleague, Dr. Nikolaidis. And then all of this work is driven by the needs of the caregivers. And we're working with occupational therapy, Dr. Lily Liu of the University of Alberta. And the need that we see is to support people with early symptoms of cognitive challenges. So as you start getting some symptoms of cognitive challenges, potentially early dementia or Alzheimer's, how could we best support these people to live at home longer? So that's the main challenge. So what we're looking forward to do now, what we're working on, is to analyze the record that we obtain from the sensors to figure out whether we can detect evidence of dementia. So we want to recognize when somebody starts making errors that may indicate cognitive challenges. For example, people with cognitive challenges may miss a step in the preparation of a recipe, may stay without doing anything inactive in the kitchen for a long time because they have forgotten what's next. And these are the types of errors that we are trying to recognize in our sensor stream. And of course, if we find evidence of these errors, we would like to develop supports to help people prompt them so that they can continue with their everyday activities of daily life.
Okay. So we hear about smart homes becoming more of a reality and being able to track, what your fridge is doing or what your stove is doing at any given time. Is that kind of a similar idea, or is it more of just tracking what the person is doing?
Now, there are 2 motivations for smart homes. The first motivation, the simpler one, in my opinion, is energy. You want to control your home in a way that preserves energy, and both in terms of and for economical purposes and sustainability purposes, and also takes care of the rudimentary tasks of us controlling the thermostats. I'm sorry. So that's the first objective. Our objective is more activity recognition and activity support of the individual living at home. So both of these objectives are supported by sensors, but the analysis is different. I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that.
No problem.
But yes, these are the 2 modalities of research in smart homes.
Okay.
Energy and health.
Good. So I realize that you're trying to infer the cognitive abilities of someone via all these sensors. Have you ever used games or some other software in a similar manner to assess someone's cognitive abilities?
Oh, excellent question. Indeed, we're developing a series of mobile applications for cognitive assessment. So right now, we have developed a special purpose whack-a-mole application, which is adaptive. So it controls how frequently the moles appear. It may cause butterflies or bunnies to also appear. And depending on, essentially the rules are more or less complicated. So in one version of the game, you may have a few infrequent moles appearing, so it is easy for you to pay attention to where the mole is and hit it. But in a more difficult version, you may have moles appearing very fast, and maybe you may have bunnies appearing at the same time, and you have to find the moles and avoid the bunnies. So you can imagine the range of complexity of this game in different configurations. So what we're doing, we're using this game to measure different cognitive parameters of people with different challenges. We have run one experiment with one study and to see how people with delirium tremens use this application. And now we're planning a second study with the University of Ottawa to see how people with different stages of dementia may behave with the game. So essentially, these games would have a dual role. First, as a bit of a diagnostic tool, and second, as an engagement, an intervention that might help us train and help people control their focus of attention better. There's a whole area of research on how games can improve different capabilities of the game players. And that's one specific area of focus for our research, how games can help with cognitive challenges.
Okay. So we do have a question on Twitter here. This comes from Tyler Friesen at Leamington District Secondary School. And Tyler wants to know, would the same ideas behind the SmartCondo be able to map out places like banks or stores, perhaps to see events like robberies or homicides?
In principle, everything, any building can be monitored with sensors, so motion sensors and different, and potentially cameras that do not have individual features can measure activity or number of people present. And yes, we can recognize in principle different types of changes in the activity, but depending on how specific the event that you want to recognize is, it may or may not be possible to recognize it accurately. So for example, if you were to monitor a big, large space, like a bank that has too many people, a scene where many people are moving and rushing in and out might or might not be very different in terms of sensor data than a robbery. The robbery is becoming different if you have cameras that can observe objects that can be used in a robbery. So the study that we have to do is define the phenomena that we want to recognize, and then instrument the space with sufficient sensors to recognize this phenomenon. And sometimes the phenomenon can be difficult and may require cameras. So in our case, we're still trying to avoid cameras, but again, you just have to have the trade-off of what you want to see and what sensors will give you this information.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I can see how that would be tricky for larger crowds as opposed to just one person in their home.
Or a few people in the home, yeah.
Right. So I'm sure that some of our students would like to know, what is your opinion on some of the video games that are out there already in terms of the ability to learn, like whether it be Minecraft you mentioned at the beginning or something like Wii Sports to give, to interact with. What do you think?
That's a very good question. So Wii Sports and is a very interesting case. because I was playing Wii Sports tennis, and I'm sure many of your audience members have recognized that you can be very good at Wii tennis without learning anything about real tennis. The tricky part with this, if you want to use games for training as opposed to just having fun, you have to make sure that the activity that you reward in the game is the same activity that would make you effective in the real activity. And this is the challenge that we're trying to surmount now with Kinect-based games. So when we're doing Kinect-based Tai Chi, we're trying to precisely recognize the posture such that when you have a good posture, a good Tai Chi posture, it is recognizable through the Kinect. This is not always the case in all of the games that we're playing out there. Some games focus more on fun rather than on the precision of the activity. And this is about physical games that involve movement, so Wii and Kinect type of activities. On the Minecraft Terraria spectrum of things, what is happening is these games can teach strategy, they can teach programming skills, and in fact this is an activity that I have worked in the past with colleagues from educational psychology. How can you use game building exercises as a way of teaching programming? It works in many cases, and the engagement level allows people to stay with the world longer. But not everything. I would say that most games are not designed with a serious purpose in time. They're more focused on fun. There may be learning that happens vicariously or accidentally, and that's fine. Not everything has to be focused on serious objectives. But in our case, these games are designed such that what is being rewarded is behaviors and activities and competencies that we want people to be able to exhibit in the real world.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, so we're almost out of time, but just one more question before we sign off, and that is, would you have any advice for students that might want to study educational video games in the future? Would you suggest they maybe go the computer science route or the psychology route?
Oh, that's a very good question. I am very interested in cognitive science, and computers and psychology are tightly linked in this area of how brain works and what we can learn from the brain to apply to computers and back and forth. But so I think it depends on what every individual enjoys the most. But one piece of advice I would have for every student is to experiment with programming. Programming and problem solving are very close to each other, and the ability to actually take a problem and decompose it in small computational pieces and solve it that way would serve well anybody in any further activity in the future. And right now there are many tools online. For example, Scratch is an online platform for learning how to program that is fun and engaging, and would let anybody try their hand at coding. Once you have a little bit of the basic skills, then you would be in a position to make a more informed decision on what would be a fun job or career for anybody interested in this general area.
Okay, very good. So on that note, we're fresh out of time. So I'd like to say thank you to all of our live stream viewers and those that sent in questions on Twitter. And of course to you, Dr. Stroulia, for taking the time to share your expertise with us today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, I'll just do a quick shout out for the event next week, which takes place on Wednesday, April 27th, when we'll learn about optics with Professor Ribald Georges Sabat from the Royal Military College of Canada. And then on Thursday, April 28th, we'll present our first French language PIR live event on the topic of astronomy. So 2 events to look forward to next week. In the meantime, thank you again. Bye-bye, Dr. Stroulia.
Bye, everyone.